Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Slidin into my DMs. This is the show on the D4 network where I talk with my DMs about Dungeons and Dragons. So we talk about D&D news, we talk about D&D rules, and basically just, have a discussion on ways to make sure that everybody at your table is having a great time. So my name's Colby. With me, as always, like I say, some of my DMs today, we've got Dallin, we've got Tori, and we've got Preston. Preston, welcome. We haven't seen you for a while.
Well, I know, it's been a while.
People who watch the show haven't seen you for a while.
I've been in the vault.
Yeah.
Welcome to season 2.
Almost ran out of air, but we're good.
Were you locked up in the
yes,
in that castle?
Waterdeep's dungeons?
Okay, you're in Waterdeep.
Oh, you're in the dungeon of the Mad Mage.
That makes sense.
Somewhere. I don't know. I made a bad turn, walked into some glyphs, almost died. Someone captured me. I don't know. Woke up here.
Right.
Well, congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats on getting out.
Tried to sing him a song, threw a dagger at him.
that is your MO.
As per usual.
Fail a performance check, throw a dagger.
Yeah, hey,
No survivors.
no witnesses. Nobody
That's
was
how
there. It didn't happen.
That's how you stay the best bard in all of the land.
That's
by
right.
killing all of your opposition.
Or
critics.
killing, yeah, exactly, the people who could give you a bad review.
Exactly.
I heard a rumor going around town that somebody else in this group has started a YouTube channel, and now I feel like I have competition. Who's the guilty party?
I'm sorry.
Mr.
I'm sorry.
Rogers' Neighborhood. So yeah, Dallin, you started a YouTube channel. Tell us about it. What is
I
it?
did. So this is a channel. Okay, so if you know me, you know I'm obsessed with film.
Mhm.
And I think I've annoyed my wife talking about film so much. She's just like, go tell somebody else. Like, I don't want to hear it anymore. So I started the channel just to chat with whoever wants to listen, basically.
With every
With
single
everybody.
person that's watching this video right now.
Exactly. So it's called Mr. Rogers Film Review, and it's more of a film analysis. So I kind of just break it down into its individual parts. So cinematography, script, editing, makeup and hairstyle, set design, all that kind of stuff, and just kind of review. I like to look at a movie and see why it's good. You can clearly watch a movie and be like, that's a good movie, but why is it a good movie? So that's kind of the aim of the channel. So yeah, there should be, at least at the time of this recording, an episode reviewing the Oscars, just kind of my thoughts and opinions, and Coda, which was the Best Picture winner.
Cool.
So go check it out.
All right. Link in the video description. So go to the video description to find a link to Mr. Rogers' channel.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. Congrats, man.
Yeah.
I hope
Thank you.
that it does really well.
Yeah.
you did a good job.
Thanks for sharing the love.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some things that I want to talk with you guys about today. I'm actually really excited for the episode today. It's going to be fun. And I think there's going to be fisticuffs. And I love a good fisticuffs. I don't think fisticuffs is the appropriate grammatical phrase there.
It is
but
now.
Regardless,
We accept it.
I enjoy them. First, though, as always, there's a quick ruling, right? I've got a question about a rule. I want to talk with you guys about it and see how you would rule something at your table. So today on the docket, a couple of weeks ago, I did a video where basically I was, and maybe I guess I'll link it here. My question is, if there's a cantrip that I want to cast and it has a duration of a minute, let's say, or longer, I don't know if there are any, but regardless, it's not just an instantaneous thing, right? It lasts for a while. Could I just be sort of compulsively casting it all of the time so that when combat broke out, it was available for me? So for example, the guidance cantrip, right? Lasts for a minute, gives a D4 on your next ability check. Things like magic stone, which essentially infuses a pebble so that you can throw it with a sling or whatever, and it can do some nice damage. Mage hand, and it was in the build I was talking about. Mage hand as an arcane trickster rogue, you could theoretically have Mage hand up all of the time because it's a cantrip, doesn't cost you any resources, right? You can cast cantrips at will There's no spell slots that you're checking off, right? And you could then use as an arcane trickster rogue, you could use Mage Hand to give yourself advantage, but I didn't want to have to like take a bonus action to cast it, thinking, what if we're just walking around all the time just casting Mage Hand, like I have OCD, and I'm just like every minute on the minute I cast Mage Hand, right? How would you deal with this at your table? And this might be a rare instance where I'm not asking for a rules as written interpretation, because I don't think there's any question on whether or not you could do this. I think the question is more, if you have a player at your table who is like got a timer for themselves, and every 60 seconds it's beep, 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 I cast Mage Hand. Beep, 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 I cast Mage Hand, right? Would drive you nuts, obviously. So what do you do instead? Or do you do anything? You say, look, if you want to benefit from this, you have to go through the obnoxiousness of actually like setting an alarm for yourself and doing this. Or do you allow it and just be like, fine, like you just cast Mage Hand all the time, you always have Mage Hand up? Or is there some way to help sort of mitigate the cheese here, because it is super cheesy, right? To make it a little more palatable but still work within the rules. So that's my question.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
To your question. What's the purpose you're doing? Are you just trying to save an action in combat?
Yeah,
You're just trying to save a setup.
Exactly. Save a bonus action. So shillelagh, right? I'm a ranger, but I'm a melee ranger, and I want to attack with my wisdom stat. The shillelagh spell exists to let me infuse a quarterstaff so that I can use, when I attack with this quarterstaff, I can use my wisdom score for my plus to hit and my plus to damage. But it's a bonus action to cast every time. I don't want combat to break out and have to always like spend a bonus action first so that I can do what I want to do. Right. Prestidigitation lasts an hour. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that until I was preparing this. So potentially you could be prestidigitating all the time. So it's essentially for action economy purposes. What do you do? Your player wants to do this. What do you do?
What I would probably do is I'd probably set up a little bit of a structure around it, right? If they want to be able to say that, okay, that's fine. But there might be certain conditions, like let's say they're sleeping and they're jumped by a bandits. At that point, I'm going to probably say they probably don't have it active while they're sleeping and unconscious. But for the sake of my sanity and for the sanity of the other players of every 3 seconds say, hey, I cast, like, how long has it been? How long has it been?
Yeah. And everyone at your table would strangle this person, right? It would just be like,
I'd probably be like, okay, like you have a reasonable expectation. You're readying an action for this to happen at, if you feel in danger. So, I might give them the ability to, depending on how much that affects the other players. Like if the other players are saying, hey, this is, how come they get this special consideration and I don't have something similar that I could do? Then I might consider something where, like, you say, hey, cool, you can cast that, you can go into it, but maybe in a surprise round scenario, maybe that might be another exception to this. Right. But otherwise, I would just say, for clarity and for just ease of management, just saying, hey, if that's their thing is to have their Mage Hand out all the time, whatever. Like, I don't think it's that game breaking.
Okay. Tori, Dallin?
I would, of course, allow it because I think it sounds fun.
Yeah.
It actually kind of reminds me of, and it probably reminds me of this because I just finished watching it, The Witcher season 2. And there's that fire mage who's always snapping his fingers. That's kind of like what it makes me think of. It's like this little thing that you're always doing, like, oh yeah, my magic's there. Oh yeah, look what I could do. It's like, I kind of like it. I don't know. I like it. I agree with Preston. Like there needs to be rules around it.
Sure. If you're sleeping, obviously, I think, that makes perfect sense. Okay. Dallin, anything to add or subtract? Yeah. Would you put any sort of parameters around this?
I would just say it's got to be all or nothing for all your players, right? You can't just allow one player to be able to have Mage Hand whenever they want and another player to not have Shillelagh.
Sure.
So I think you've got to say it's either yes or no, and then stick to it for all of your players just to make it fair. Okay. So I personally, I would allow it. I don't see anything wrong with it. Just a bonus action or an action. No big deal.
One thing that I've seen a lot of people say in the comments, and I'm guessing some might be commenting right now, and then when they hear me say it, go, oh crap, backspace. is where they'll say fine, like the DM will say, okay, fine, I'll allow this, but I don't know if you cast it right before combat broke out or if you cast it 59 seconds ago, right? So like when combat breaks out, they'll just roll a d10, since 6 seconds is a turn and it lasts for a minute, right? Roll a d10, and that's how many, whatever you roll, that's how many rounds you have left on the current version of, your shillelagh or whatever.
I like that.
When combat breaks out, that way at least reins in the cheese, maybe just a little bit. It might not matter a lot of times if you roll a 5 or a 6 or a 7. Combat's probably only going to last 3 or 4 or 5 rounds, most of the time, right? So it's fine. But sometimes you're going to roll a 1 and be like, crap, okay, well, on round 2 I'm going to have to cast shillelagh with my bonus action. Fine. I think that feels like a reasonable compromise to me.
For sure. I like that.
It's much better, at least, than literally like I did in my short for this video. It's like every 60 seconds the DM's trying to say something and the player's just constantly interrupting them. I cast Mage Hand. It's like, okay, fine, we got to come up with a better solution than this, because everybody wants to kill you.
Or in the sense of the one with the magic stones. Okay, I scoop up some stones on the ground and then I cast it like every couple seconds as they're walking down the street.
Yeah.
It's like
totally disruptive and obnoxious.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Quick ruling done. Let's move on to the deep dive conversation. Earlier this week, our friend Corey sent us a link to a subreddit thread where there was a D&D player who was arguing that they sometimes fudged numbers for their own character at the table. And of course, everyone's initial reaction was just outrage. How dare they? Well, maybe not everyone.
How could you?
But anyway,
sacrilege.
We kind of got talking and
Yes.
debating just in chat, right, about the issue. And I found the idea and the debate so compelling that I wanted to do a Slide Into My DMs episode about it. Corey, unfortunately, is no longer with us. So
RIP to the GOAT.
So he couldn't join, but hopefully he'll be able to watch this in the afterlife and share his own opinions in the comments. Before I turn you guys loose on the topic, let me just provide this as a little preamble. I think personally, the way that you answer this question, right? Should a player be fudging dice rolls or stats? Should a DM be fudging dice rolls or stats? Should nobody ever fudge any dice rolls? You know what I mean? I think the way you answer that question depends primarily on one thing. Do you think that the most important aspect of D&D is the story aspect or the game aspect, right? I think if you care more about the story that you're telling with your friends at your table, then you'll tend to be a little more lenient towards number fudging. I think if you care more about the game aspect, that D&D is primarily a game, right? And it's all about the rules and, being true to like the game aspect of it, that you're probably going to be a little less lenient about number fudging. And I think that most people probably fall somewhere in between. Like we all love both aspects of D&D, right? It's not just one or the other. So I think there's a spectrum here. And I think everybody's probably going to fall somewhere in between, again, depending on what's more important to them. Are they here primarily to like tell a story, and the story is the thing that matters the most, and everything should be subservient to telling a good, cool story? Or, is it the rules in the game that's like, nope, and like the game comes first and everything is sort of subservient to that? And yes, there's story, of course, obviously, but like the story is shaped by the game, not the other way around. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's my thoughts on it. You guys may have a different opinion. Here's what I've asked everybody to do. I've assigned Preston, Dallin, and Tori to, as if we were in like a high school debate club, to pick a side of this argument and to argue it as though they truly believed this. So the opinions and ideas that are about to be expressed may not necessarily reflect those of the debater, right? But for
or
the
your
sake
sponsors.
of definitely my sponsors, because I don't have any for this video.
Sponsored by Kobe Scobies.
That's right. Yeah, I should go get some kombucha. Anyway, so in my mind, there's three sort of viewpoints here that you could potentially take that I've asked you guys to argue. Viewpoint number one that Dallin is going to take the helm on is that dice rolls, stats, no numbers should ever be fudged ever by anyone, period, the end. That it destroys the integrity of the game, whatever, right? So we're going to hear from Dallin first. Then we're going to hear from Preston, who's going to argue that fudging dice rolls and numbers on occasion is okay by the DM only for the sake of, of story or for the sake of everybody at your table having the most fun or whatever. And then we're going to hear from Tori, who is going to be maybe the straw man or the punching bag. Sorry, Tori, who's
Thanks.
going to argue.
Just call me Brander.
That's a Tales of
Punch
Veneria
her
joke.
face. Yeah. Sorry.
Tales of Veneria. Right. Who's going to argue that players too can maybe fudge numbers or dice rolls once in a while. I'm assuming in the name of telling a good story or everybody having fun at your table, whatever, right?
In the name of love.
In the name of love.
The name of love.
That's right.
Yes.
And we'll debate and discuss as we go. But again, just to reiterate, the viewpoints that are about to be expressed do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints and personal opinions of the person who's arguing them. Okay. So, Dallin.
All right.
What do you got for us? Why should numbers and stats never be fudged by anybody, DM, player, regardless, ever?
There's one major thing you got to know.
Okay.
You don't roll the dice unless you are willing to accept the outcome. That's the first thing you got to know. I think that the idea that DMs are above cheating is crazy. So it's a communal storytelling, right? The DM may have a heavier hand in that. They might craft the world, the NPCs, things of that nature. And for the most part, the story beats, but they are not the end all be all when it comes to the story. So let me consult my notes. They should not control the outcomes necessarily, especially things that need to be controlled by random dice rolls. If you take away the risk of failure or the risk of death because you think it tells a more compelling story, then you're taking away, for at least some players, kind of the excitement or the risk factor of the game. And you shouldn't include it in the first place if there's no chance that they can achieve that, essentially. So players' choices will also begin to feel hollow if you are constantly fudging your dice rolls as a DM. And at least in my opinion, a player will automatically assume every time that you roll the dice that it's a fudge number. They'll start to get that like paranoia of like, is this actually what's happening? Or is this just the DM controlling the story? And if you're fudging something in sake of the monster being able to hit you or whatever, then like, why are they even rolling at that point? Right? Because you've already decided that the monster is going to hit or save or whatever. I think it reflects on a DM who was underprepared or didn't like scale their encounter properly. Because you could easily homebrew a monster and say they have legendary resistances, right? And at least that falls in the agreed upon rules. But just outright being like, yeah, no, they succeed, then why did you roll the dice? What, like, it destroys kind of the integrity of the reason we have dice in the game. I think that the dice can dictate the story, but the story should never dictate the dice, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing when you watch like a bad movie or you read a book that the plot just happens because of plot, right? Like the character escaped.
Right. It feels contrived.
Death. Exactly. And that's what you run into is a contrived feeling. It feels cheap and hollow when you do that. I think that's pretty much what I've got there. So
yeah, I mean, some compelling points. to be fair, and in interest of being transparent, I think I myself tend to lean more towards that camp, which probably surprises nobody, being like the numbers, rules, lawyery type guy that I am, right? I will say I don't necessarily think I'm right. I think what's right is probably going to be different for every table, and I'm willing to have my mind change. So I look forward to what Preston and Tori have to say. But maybe I would just add this. For me, when somebody decides to fudge numbers in the interest of, because whatever, maybe they think that it's going to lead to more fun at the table, maybe they think it's going to make for a better story, it almost, I think, robs everybody else at the table of the chance to adapt and potentially tell an even better or more interesting story, right? Because it's like, that was unexpected, and that like is a curveball, but we can deal with it, right? And it almost feels like you're doing improv comedy, but you don't trust the people that you're doing improv comedy with to actually, I mean, be good and to be able to do yes and
exactly
as well as you can, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, and what good story have you read where the characters don't fail? Like, that's weird. The characters have to fail to be able to achieve.
Although number fudging can happen to fail too,
sure,
right? Like, I think we've probably all seen it both ways at probably everybody's table, frankly, where it's like, maybe that would have succeeded, but for the sake of story or whatever, it failed because it's going to make a better story. I don't know. I can see it happening, I guess. I'd say that.
Yeah.
So here's my question, Dallin. Do you think that a DM should roll in front of the group? Like,
no. And the only reason being, you don't want your players to necessarily know like the plus to hit from a monster, or, other their save numbers, things like that. So that's kind of kept more for the DM, just to kind of keep the battle more interesting, I think, because you're not going to just know, okay, this monster has a +7 on their con save, so I'm not going to do that's to help with metagaming. I don't think that's meant to.
And I kind of push for the
DM
of the same, but a little bit different, where I think combat, into Colby's point, for those who like to have the integrity of combat, and eventually if someone's going to have some kind of meta knowledge about the game, they're going to figure it out anyway. It's just simple mathematics. And so in my mind, if you do have those players at your table, rolling openly for combat, I think would be better. And then rolling privately for any RP situations, right?
That's interesting, because I guess I would have thought that a counter argument maybe to Dallin's points is like, there's a DM screen for a reason, and it's to allow, when absolutely necessary or whatever, for the DM to like maybe fudge numbers or be secretive about it. But I kind of never really thought about the fact of, well, maybe it's just there to kind of counter potential metagaming. And so, so I can't go, he rolled a 13, but he told me he got a 21 to hit me. So I know he's got a +8 to hit, and then, but whatever. Okay. I can.
So to that same point though, should players be rolling behind a screen? I mean, the DM should remember that,
the DM has
what their AC is and stuff.
Right.
Shh, 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 shh.
Thank you, Dallin. We will continue the debate, but before we do, I want to give Preston a chance to present the argument in favor of DMs being allowed to fudge numbers, fudge rolls once in a while. So Preston, tell us what you got.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start with my opening argument here, right? And this is coming from the DMG. This is in chapter 8, for anybody who's wondering. I don't have a specific page number for you. But, as it goes through and it talks about, as a dungeon master, how you need to set an expectation, and you need to kind of decide throughout the book. It kind of talks about that, where you need to decide the tone of your game. Is it primarily combat related? Is it more RP related? Is it whatever kind of stuff there? And in there, it talks about dice rolling and its purpose, right? And specifically, it talks about the DM screens, right, and the purpose of them, right? But one of the things it specifically says in there, rolling behind a screen lets you fudge the results if you want to, right? It specifically says that in the DMG. And so again, when it comes to talking about, hey, is it legal, right? Is it something that is a part of D&D? It's in the DMG, and setting that as a baseline for kind of, I guess, what comes next on here. And when as a DM, especially a DM of new players, right? I found that when I was DMing new players, I was fudging things a lot more as a new DM than I do now. And I think that that's liberating to let the dice, fall as they may and to do it. But I have found in certain circumstances that the intervention, and I'll take the blame for that, where, my lack of preparation or setting the bar too high, making it too deadly an encounter, whatever. But there were instances where I wanted to make the combat difficult, but did not want to kill the players. I didn't want a TPK. And it was going to result in a TPK situation, right? Everyone was either unconscious, 1 hit point, like any kind of damage, they would all fall over dead, and that was it. That would be the end of it. And sure, I could bring up a story reason in there of why and why not. But I find in some of those scenarios that as a DM, you have to ask yourself, okay, is this going to kill the fun for everybody? Is this going to end their story? Because as a DM, you have to kind of decide what is it that I get enjoyment out of? Is it the combat and running these large scale things? Is it creating political intrigue in a story? Or is it seeing my players become those heroes and heroines that they want to be, right? One instance of a new character coming in, right? I had a new character. She came in and she had commented that because she was new to her character, she was still trying to feel out how they were along with the rest of the group dynamic, and the rest of the group was very strong. So usually in combat, they would have killed most of these lower level minion type creatures before it was even her turn, right? And so she commented that, hey, I haven't fought, or I haven't killed anything in the last 4 sessions, and she just commented on that it was something that was kind of prohibitive to her, right? So I made sure that in another campaign, I took some of those numbers, instead of taking directly from the book, I fudged and changed some of those the stat blocks for hit points and stuff to make sure that creature would at least be alive for her to at least hit it during that combat, right?
I mean, there's definitely some compelling points there, I think, especially for like new or inexperienced DMs. I think like having that ability to be like, hey, like I'm learning too, and I overtuned this combat, or I undertuned it, for that matter, and it's not going to be any fun if you guys just like one shot everything. Or it's definitely going to, I would think anyway, be less fun for most people if a less experienced DM is just like being like, well, sorry, like I made this 5 times deadly encounter for you guys and everybody died, and like that was my bad, but like you're the ones that pay the consequences, right?
Right. Or in the case of, hey, you put it to the edge, and just in unlucky circumstances, let's see that creature gets a critical hit 3 times in a row, and each of those crits are like 80 health, right? That you're basically chunking one by one. And at that point, as a DM, I'd be like, like randomness is cool, but this is going to lead to an unsavory experience.
It's too much.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it kind of gets back to maybe some of the things that Dallin was talking about. At the end of the day, it's like, okay, like how much do you want to just let the dice decide kind of everything? Maybe not everything, right? But like, but just like put absolute trust and faith in the dice and in the rules, and then just force your players to adapt to sometimes really crappy RNG and or really awesome RNG, you know what I mean? And
it's liberating.
And how much, sure, I you know what, I mean, not to argue Dallin's point for him, you might be able to say, hey, like deciding as a DM to never fudge numbers is a little bit like, well, it takes the burden off of me of
if you die, it wasn't favoritism, it was just sorry,
just
sucks
the
to be
dice.
you. Like
what am I supposed to do? And not have to play God, I guess, in that way, but
including making sure that you as a DM are still having fun too, because if you're not having fun at the end of the day, like you're gonna get burnt out, you're not gonna like it, it's not gonna be as fun.
Sure. All right, Dallin, Tori, it looked like you guys were taking some notes. I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to comment on there?
I've got rebuttals.
Go for it.
So, fist up, buddy. Okay. You said you would fudge dice to save a player or save from a TPK.
Mhm.
So my question is there ever a place for a TPK in D&D then, by that
Yes.
logic?
Yes.
What would
If it's a table that's combat oriented, whatever, let them die. Don't care. If it's somebody who is, and that's nothing against going very optimized against it. I'm just saying that's what they're expecting, right?
Sure.
But if that character, if they were so heavily invested, they have like that 30-page whatever backstories, and everyone like they're trying to meet this goal, and they get killed by some inconsequential
Like a
crappy
little
roll of a
goblin.
dice, like a little goblin, like that. Just
Welcome
like
to
totally,
Elden Ring.
yeah, exactly, like Elden Ring style. You just get crapped on by just some random NPC. It doesn't feel good. Like it doesn't tell a compelling story in my mind. And in that particular case, like maybe it's not necessarily fudging the roll. Maybe they do go unconscious and, they take them captive and have to fight their way out.
Sure.
But keeping from that TPK, unless it's, something that they obviously pushed the issue on and they're fully aware of the consequence, like they're going up against Strahd at level 2 or something, then in those cases, it just kind of becomes one of those where you, as a DM, you're trying to kind of keep that balance, right?
Right. I guess in my mind, it's a game and you can lose a game.
It's true.
There's a way to lose a game, right? Not that you can like win D&D, but
Can I tell you, every night when I get home from our sessions, my husband asks me, "So did you win?" And I'm like,
the answer
don't even
is
understand
always
what I do.
yes.
Yeah.
Every
you play
time
the
you
game.
play D&D, you win.
That's
what's
true.
so great about it.
1000%.
That's true.
Second rebuttal. What is the purpose of a skill DC if the DM can just overwrite it? Right? Because on the back of your DM screen, it says, easy is a 5, medium is a 10 or whatever, hard is 15, 20, extra hard is 30. So then what's the point of that skill check if you can just be like, yeah, no, you don't succeed? Or they roll like a 5 and you're like, yeah, it worked. You're
Right.
good.
And that one, in that same breath, then why are you rolling? This is to yours, why are you rolling at all? Because if I'm a thief, right, and I'm ridiculously dexterous and there's like a 1% chance of failure, unless there's something very, very, mission impossible about what they're trying to do, let them just succeed. Like nothing feels worse than being a bard with 13 charisma and then failing 6 performance checks in a row. Like
13 charisma is not very good for a bard. You mean like a plus 13 to your skill check?
Sorry, plus 13 to my skill check. Yes, sorry, when a charisma check. Yes, a plus 13, 13 to my charisma check.
The rules lawyer.
You are correct. You're correct.
The time.
Not a
But wouldn't
13.
that make a better story, right? Like the bard who's so good for some reason is now having stage fright.
It could.
I will say that thinking back, and it's funny because the video that I just recorded this week, I actually call you out, Preston, and I talk about I built a bard character, and I talk about like how what you should take expertise in, and it should probably be performance, unless unless you're a bard that just seems to always fail at the performance checks, like my friend Preston.
Yes.
And we've kind of been joking about it a little bit here, but at least for me, and I would argue maybe for some other people at the table, like some of the most memorable and fun story moments from our first campaign, the Bronze Battalion, our Broken Spear group, came from like Brom always failing his performance checks and like having to figure out like what to do as a result. But that said, like I'm sure there are also plenty of players out there who would stop having fun at the table if they felt like they were constantly failing at something, right? Now, is it the role of the DM to sort of like hold their hand and coddle them and make sure that they are having fun and succeeding? I mean, some would argue yes, and I'm not here to say they're wrong, but I don't know. It's something to think about. Maybe there is some merit, like Dallin says, to letting people fail and letting the story, sort of come from that failure, or success, somebody succeeding all the time.
I just say the last counter rebuttal is that if you as a DM have spent, like let's say the characters spent a whole bunch of time writing their big long backstories and you've written this very intricate thing, that's a huge kind of like letting the air out of the tires if you spent like a week and a half writing a campaign specific to those characters, right? And obviously you don't want to pigeonhole yourself too much and have a little bit of leeway there, but that's just that for me. It would be oh crap, I invested a lot of time in that and they're never going to see any of it, and just crumple it up, throw it away. Like,
sure, that can be a little deflating for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Tori. So we've heard the one extreme. Nobody should ever fudge rolls ever. We've heard kind of the middle ground of, well, for DMs it's okay once in a while, maybe only, right? Tell us the other what I would consider the other extreme, which is it's okay for players to fudge numbers sometimes too.
It's my Twitch.
I am so excited that I am going to defend this topic.
You're going to defend
again. I just want
cheating.
to remind everyone that I don't necessarily feel this way. Although
that's okay.
I might convince you that this is a good idea, because I've kind of convinced myself as I've gone through this process.
Good. That's good. Good argument.
Okay. Now, as I was approaching this topic, I thought for me, I had to put some rules around when it would be appropriate for a player to lie about a dice roll. And for me, those rules are as follows. Number one, if it's going to affect the life or death of one of yourself or one of your fellow players, that's inappropriate. Do not lie about that. The second one is if it's going to completely alter the story by you lying about a dice roll, then no, those things need to be left up to chance, in my opinion. But there are some times when I think it could be appropriate for you to lie as a player. First one is paint a picture for you. Okay. You and your party, you have gone on a months-long quest to find this big bad evil guy. And you've gone through dungeons, you've climbed a mountain, you're now at the top of this vast peak, and looks out forever. It's gorgeous, but terrifying because the big bad evil guy is right there. And he happens to be the arch nemesis of one of the other players. Okay. So you go into this epic battle. It's amazing. You kill all of his minions. You're killing him. You get to a point where it's your turn, and the DM has pretty much told you that there's uno mas, that he's about to die. He's looking really bad. You hate to metagame, but you've played for so long, you know that he's probably really low on resources, and it's your turn. But the player whose turn is after you is the arch nemesis, right? And so you roll the die and you know that you hit because you figured out the AC by now. And so in order to make it like a really epic story, you decide that, do you know what? I miss. And the player who's after you, this is their arch nemesis, they hit and they get to kill this guy. Sure, you could hit him and say, well, I just knock him unconscious and then let them like lob his head off. But that's not as epic and cool as someone like, I hit and I come with my great axe and I smash him. And it's amazing. And it's like this great story that everyone wants to tell. The bard goes and tells it. He rolls poorly on his performance, but it's okay. People still love the song. Okay.
So fudging numbers in the name of restraint, not something that I had considered. Surprising no one.
Okay. So that's the first one. Let me give you another scenario. Okay. My thought is that I think it's okay to potentially lie about dice rolls as long as it's helping someone else and not benefiting yourself. Okay. So maybe that's like that's the mom in me. I just want to help you. Second scenario. You're so excited to play today and your buddy gets there. You're sitting down and getting ready and you're like, hey, how was everyone's week? And he's like, oh man, had the worst week ever. I got fired from my job. My girlfriend left me. My dog died. Like it is.
Is this a country song?
Yeah. It's
my truck tires were gone.
What
That's
people
right.
write country songs about. Okay. It's been a really rough week for him. And so you start playing the game and you can just tell that he is totally bummed out and cannot really get into the game. He's just struggling. Okay. And you get to a point and you're both like really good at, you both have really high intelligence or something. Okay. And so you're like going through a dungeon and your DM's like, okay, well, do an investigation check, check for traps. And you both roll and you roll higher than him, but he needs a win. Okay. So you're like, oh man, I failed. He's like, whoa, I gotta, whatever. The DM's like, oh, that's perfect. You find this trap and you save the day. Okay. Now, how's he going to feel? He's going to feel pretty great. It might just be one small win versus a lot of really horrible things. But I think that if it's in the name of blowing someone up a little bit, and that's like an extreme example, but, and that's not like a huge game-changing thing, right? It's not changing life and death, and it's not completely altering the outcome of a storyline. So I think in those two instances, yeah, it's totally fine. Okay. Use sparingly, but I see no problem with it. And you can show your appreciation for my argument in the comments below by leaving a skull emoji because I killed it.
That's perfect. It's perfect.
I will admit I'm taken aback by the fudge numbers to make other people look good attack that you took here. It's difficult to argue against because then you feel like a jerk.
I do have an argument against it.
All right,
let's hear it.
Okay, so my argument in the favor of if you roll with the intent of just letting the other person do it, why don't you just hold your action?
Good point.
Because then it's obvious that you're pandering.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but I agree with what Colby said. It'll seem so obvious. Like, wouldn't you rather have it be, it feels natural, and it'd be so cool to let them have that epic moment.
That's fair.
What do you got, Dallin?
All right, this is my rule again, right? Don't roll the dice if you're not willing to accept the outcome. So instead of rolling the dice and then lying and saying I rolled lower, like I missed or whatever, you could just use your turn to literally say I like grab the big bad guy and I drag him, and you can do like a strength contest.
Take the help action.
Exactly. Get him in front of the next person to get that kill and make it part of the story that you're like, your character is willing to sacrifice the kill for the person who deserves it. So I think you should always relate it to story. Yeah. So that's number one.
That's an option. You could do either.
It's true.
The other one with the investigation, like you're looking for traps or whatever, you can just aid the player, right? And give them advantage. And so in my opinion, I think those are better than lying and potentially hurting the trust of your table and your DMs specifically.
Especially if the person's sitting right next to you and they see that you rolled a crit and you're like, oh, critical fail. And they're like, that's why we should all have screens, right? We should all have screens.
Right?
I'm saying.
I'm going to change my paradigm a little bit onto Tori's side. That what if your DM is, they're not interpreting the rules as written, and it's not something that's expected by the table, and it's for DM inexperience or malice, and your DM just sucks, right?
I think it's a passive aggressive way to fight your DM, right? Because like, shouldn't you just be like, hang on, what about X or whatever?
What if he just?
I think if you're going down in like a blaze of glory, you should do that 100%.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm finding a new group.
Stick it to the man.
We're gonna make this the crappiest game for everyone.
Crit.
So, okay, let me ask this, and this is maybe just me being devil's advocate here, but if a DM can occasionally fudge numbers in the name of making sure that everybody at the table is having more fun and or telling a better story, why can't a player do the same? Why couldn't they say, you know what? I think this would be really cool for my character. This is my arch nemesis, right? And I just rolled a natural 1, and it's going to be 4 more turns, and I know he's probably got 5 hit points left. Like, I'm not going to get the killing blow. Like, it would be way cooler if I killed this guy. I didn't roll a natural 1. I got a 17, right? whatever. Why, if it's okay for the DM to do that, why is it not okay for a player to do that?
I agree with you 100%. I think, right, it's a cooperative storytelling. So if you're going to give the DM the chance to completely alter the story, why would you not let the player, right? It's only fair.
But the DM is, in this case, the arbiter, the god, so to speak, of this world, right? The creator of this world.
Yeah, but
would
they
they
don't
not
create
have access to
they
that?
don't create the outcomes, right? That's supposed to be what
they
the
write the
dice and
story,
the player do.
right? And if they're railroading,
Yeah, but
for
is it a
instance, in the
book?
case of bad DM,
Is it a book or is it a choose your own adventure book, right? Is it like hard fiction, or do you get to decide how this is going to go?
Is it a group story as opposed to one person telling a story and everybody else being players?
Or is it a Goosebumps choose your own adventure that's pre-written by the DM and you're just choosing one of the outcomes they chose?
That's probably the one right there.
I mean,
let's be honest.
I'm not saying that I believe that players should have the ability
we're all playing devil's advocate
to fudge numbers, but I can see somebody making that argument, right? And I kind of think they might have a point. It's sort of like, but Preston, I think you have a point as well. Like, yes, there is a difference between the role of the dungeon master and the role of everybody else, right? And I think
a little more fiat.
I think everybody at the table, at most tables anyway, would sort of agree, yeah, like we're playing at this person's table. At the end of the day, they're the ones that have the final say. They're the ones that, might have some house rules, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, they're the ones that are, let's be honest, putting in a lot more work, sacrificing a lot more, you know what I mean, to make this happen. They don't get to enjoy the game from a player aspect. Maybe it's unfair to say, well, they don't have any more power than everybody else at the table does. Maybe they've earned that right in a way that the players haven't, to sort of have a little extra say in shaping the story, et cetera, et cetera.
I think they have extra power, but I think it's in interpreting rules, settling disputes, setting prices for things, the tone of the story, the locations. I don't think that they are the sole arbiter of this is the way the story is going to go, like it or not. Because now we're just getting into like a DM just railroading the campaign, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I have to say, for me, it's really impossible for me to take one side on any of these things, because I feel like there's that happy medium in the middle somewhere, right? Because I do see good points all around. Like, I can understand where if an inexperienced DM didn't properly build a fight, an encounter, I can see a time where they would need to fudge the numbers a little bit. I think we should grant them that, extend them that mercy, and like players. I know that was the point I was supposed to defend.
That's okay. We can express personal opinions now.
Okay, good. I can drop this.
Yeah.
The weight
You
off.
don't have to be the mean guy anymore. Like, for players, I don't feel as strongly about that, but I do think that maybe there could be a time when it would be helpful to better the story a little bit, not change it, but make it a little more epic. I don't know.
And I wonder, to your point too, if there would be a table rule somewhere that when you were explaining about, like, okay, I want to roll, but I want to roll it in favor of the next person, right? I wonder if there is any table rules out there right now that is like, let's say you roll a critical success. Can you pass that to the next player? Can you somehow extend that as like inspiration? Hey, I want to forego actually hitting this, like be open about it and say, listen, DM, can you give him inspiration instead of me actually hitting this? Like, maybe I do some kind of like grand flourish and get their attention for a second. And that's my help.
Critical help.
Yeah. Like, give them something. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I sympathize with your argument that for me as a DM, my enjoyment comes when I see that light in my players' eyes, when I see that they're like, either they connected the dots with some obscure, stupid reference that I put in there, and they're like, wait a second, I know what this is. Or, hey, like, this is a magnum opus. This is the whole thing I've been building up for. And then at the end, like, just bare knuckle, everyone's down to one hit point, and then they get that final blow, just like you said, giving them that kind of that feeling of awesomeness. Want to be able to give that to people.
Yeah. I think as a DM, you can fudge your numbers sparingly. If you get in the habit of doing it every session, every combat,
Ruins
it's
integrity.
just gonna hurt the game. Your players are gonna know. Everyone has a tell, and they'll be able to pick up on it eventually. So I just
Right.
I
It
think you
destroys
gotta
that
be
trust
sparingly.
for sure.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the important part there is if someone does ask you openly and says, hey, did you fudge that number? My question to them would be, do you really want to know? And if they say yes, then I'll say, yeah, I fudged the number. And it was for this reason. This is my reasoning. This is the path I took, etc. Or versus they say, maybe I don't want to know because then I'm not gonna enjoy the story as much as I did. And then I'll say, no, then it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that integrity, just like you said, you have to have that integrity, because otherwise there's going to be that constant suspicion of like, are they playing favorites? Like, is this what's going on here?
I think, I think at the end of the day, obviously everybody's different. Some people are not going to care that much. Some people are going to, I think, be like, you know what, like I'm here for the story. If the DM's going to fudge the numbers, doesn't really bother me that much. Like, that was cool, and that's how it should have been. And like, we're just here to tell a story, right? And like I said at the beginning, and then there's going to be some people, and I probably tend to fall more into this camp, right, where it's like, if there's a danger that if the player thinks that you're fudging the numbers, or you tell them that you are, the player is going to then become suspicious that you're just always fudging the numbers, right?
Mhm.
And maybe the answer to that is just that as players, we need to just get over it and just be able to deal with it, right? And just accept the fact that, hey, this happens sometimes. It doesn't ruin the game. It doesn't make it whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the DM's table. It's their prerogative to once in a while, occasionally be able to, in the name of, an epic story moment, or maybe they overtuned or undertuned the encounter, whatever. Like, I just need to be able to accept that and be okay with it, and just still have fun, not get into my head about it, not worry about it so much, right?
Especially with one shots, because one shots to me are
Sure.
the absolute worst for trying to hit, like, especially if it's anything like above a level 3 or something, trying to balance that kind of encounter. You have no idea what your players are gonna
Sure.
what kind of crazy whatever they're gonna come up with.
But my advice, I guess, if I had any to DMs, would be, if you are going to occasionally fudge the numbers, I would be super hesitant to hint or let your players know that you do, because unless you know that they're all a bunch of just like easygoing, not number crunchy, it's the integrity of the game type people, and they're just going to be okay with it. Because I think you do run into risk there of some of your players. You're really interested in making sure everybody has fun. For some of them, it's going to ruin their fun a little bit if they think you're fudging the numbers, right? And so it's
Right, because it'll feel like there's
balancing
not
act.
any. It'll feel like there's not any stakes to,
Yeah.
there's like, what's the point? Like, if we're never going to die.
A death save if you're not going to actually die.
Yeah,
Sure.
death is part of the game. And I think I think it's almost more like, well, what would this story be like if there had been a death, right? Is the group now bonded closer together because of this? So I don't know. It's tough.
It's tough. I'm sure that everyone watching has an opinion on the matter, and I hope that you're all commenting and letting us know.
Sure you are.
So yes, please
Rage
do.
type.
And
Tell us how you feel.
and all of the things. But let's wrap, because I'm sure we've gone long as we usually do.
Okay.
I love you
Who's
guys.
going to drop the beat?
You're awesome. And I
Because
love
we're
you
gonna
guys
wrap.
too, all of my DMs. Thank you guys for participating as always. I love these conversations. They're a lot of fun. Let's continue the conversation. But more importantly, it's Thursday. That means it's game night for us.
Game night.
So I will see you guys in about 4 hours live, and we'll roll some dice, and nobody's going to be fudging any of them, right?
Only Tori.
Maybe.
Everyone pinky promise.
Only Tori, but so that other people can
It's to
succeed.
benefit you. Great. Now I'm
cool.
going to get beat up. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go now.
How's it going,
Take it
guys?
away. Take it away. Take it away now.
You ready to fight?
Let's do it.
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
This is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
We talk about other things that I can never remember. All right.
Be prepared to die.
What was that?
In combat.
What was that? It looked like a snake or something.
That was my goose neck. It's like the camera holder.
Preston, you look really sunburned.
You do look really
Yeah.
small.
What happened to you?
You're
I
very
think it's
pink.
the pink. I think it's my shirt. Hold on, let me switch some. We can switch some hues around. Is that any better? I can even crank it up.
Now you look
Oh, there
more
you go. Well,
like a hot dog.
that looks a little better.
I'm going for bratwurst, not hot dog.
Your default speaker has changed. Say something.
Say
Yes.
something.
Suddenly I can't hear you.
Just kidding.
Sorry.
You.
I don't know why that changed. Hold on one sec.
What?
Did this come unplugged? There.
Hello?
It did. It came unplugged.
Welcome back,
I
Colby.
clearly heard you fart, Colby. So you can't hide. Can't hide behind it.
I just muted it really quick. I can't hear you guys. What's going on? Well, let me phrase it this way.
That stroke again.
Yes. Reset. Okay.
Before we start, Ollie wants to say hi.
Oh,
Hi, Ollie. Let's move on to the deep dive conversation. And this is going to be a good one.
That
I
was
think.
the splash.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. The
I
deep
miss-
dive, 'cause
I
we're
miss
diving.
it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
Keeping things awkward since 1986.
your leisure dungeon.
In my
that could be.
What happens there? I don't even want to know.
It's like Vegas. You don't know.
I don't know,
And it
Tori.
never
You are
leaves.
the dungeon mistress. So if anybody
am.
would know, you probably would.
And I won't tell. Scenario? Am I from Canada?
Scenario. You say scenario. I
You're
say
from-
scenario.
Canada.
Say scenario.
Scenario. Here is the second scenario.
Scenario.
That sounds like an STD.
Yeah,
so
that's not pleasant. Whoa.
Whoa, somebody
had
agrees
strong
with me.
feelings.
Or disagrees with me. I'm not sure.
Ollie,
I don't speak squeal.